Futsal community, the Dr. Nakar here. Welcome to our Caro Futsal Podcast number 44, our first podcast in series 3 of interviews. And for our first podcast of this series, we have Dave Payne, former COO, Chief Operating Officer, and Football and Futsal Development Manager for Football New Zealand. One of the driving forces of Futsal New Zealand, which has just won its second OFC Oceania Nations Cup and qualified for its first ever FIFA Futsal World Cup to be hosted in Uzbekistan next year. Dave, congratulations on your second OFC title, the spot for the FIFA Futsal World Cup, and everything that has been happening with Futsal in New Zealand. Welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me. Good to be on the Caro Futsal Podcast. We've had plenty of chats over social media over the years. It's good to actually have it in person.
Yeah, it's great. And every time your name comes about, everyone has a lot of good things to talk about you. And but it'll be great to hear from you about your journey. So let's get into. But before we get into the podcast, could you share with us a bit of the current status of Futsal New Zealand?
Yeah, look, I mean, futsal it's in a great space in New Zealand. I mean, like many sports, COVID did have an impact on it. So New Zealand had a very long shutdown. So the participation numbers went down in all sports across New Zealand. They're starting to come back up again now. But, we've still got, the leagues and the schools programs and the structure in New Zealand still in its tens of thousands. It's still the fastest growing sport in New Zealand alongside the likes of sort of badminton and basketball. They're both growing very quickly as well. Mm-hmm. It's in a very healthy position with futsal development officers across the federations, the six federations in New Zealand. It's very much set. The structures are very much set for continued growth. So it's in a good space.
Great to hear. And when we talk about the leagues, what are the leagues like? What national leagues you have, state leagues, and just try to paint a picture for the people listening to the podcast.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of evolved over the years as well. I mean, our very first league we had, the first national league was men's only, and that was going back in 2010. And actually, it was an Australian team, Maccabi Hakawa Futsal, came along to help make up the numbers, so we could have 6 teams in the league. And back then, that's when we couldn't get every federation organised or wanting to join the league to start with. So we kind of worked with the willing, gave opportunities to teams from outside the formal structure to come in, and that then actually created that groundswell where the formal structure wanted to be involved and could see what other entities were doing. Back when we got futsal set up in New Zealand, there were 7 federations in New Zealand. Before that was 24 district regions of football in New Zealand. So it had been moved down to 7, which made it a bit easier for futsal. And the aim was to make sure that we had a futsal development manager in each one of them 7 federations to drive the growth of futsal. Mm-hmm. And then the league structure was based on having a representative team from each of them federations, so equivalent to your state in Australia. So it would be like having a Football New South Wales futsal team and a Victoria FFV futsal team. So it wasn't a club model, which Australia went club up. We actually went down. So we took a top-down approach because by doing that, we could have a bit more control around the growth and actually make sure we could, the funding that we could get, which wasn't a lot, we could have that initial control of it and actually make sure it was spent wisely and push the growth down to drive futsal. So a bit of a different approach from that point of view.
It makes sense. And but what's the national league like right now? As in, how long does it go for? What are the clubs involved?
Yeah, so it's slightly changed now in terms of it's good. It's got a sponsor now, so it's the Ford Futsal Super League, men's and women's. We've got the both leagues, which is great. It's still the structure is largely still the same as it was over the last sort of 4 or 5 years, just pre-COVID. There was a look to go into more sort of home and away structure before COVID, but that took a bit of a knock on to the structure of the league. So at the moment it's played in series. So you have a home series, you have a home and away game with the closest team. Then you have a number of travel series where groups of teams will go away and play against other teams. And then you have a final series. So it's based on a series format. Actually very similar to what the FA in the UK, they looked at our model and they've got a very similar model over there now. So it's not the optimal model in terms of if you want to have a professional league where you're making sure that, player fatigue, etc. The reality is cost constraints come in. So it's a fine balance between economies of scale and getting what you can out of the budget you've got in terms of as many games possible. So you can have a full league, but doing it in a very constrained window. Yeah.
You do what you can. The first F League in Australia was a series of 3 series. As you said, you played 3-4 games in a weekend, and then you play a final series. What's the involvement of the Ford in the league, as in the sponsors?
Well, they're a sponsor of New Zealand football, and within the sponsorship package they have New Zealand football, they will have there'll be a tiered package, and futsal is one of the tiers that sits within that package of sponsorship overall for football as a whole. Obviously, I don't actually have the information in terms of the actual what it's worth or anything like that, but it certainly brings that added exposure to futsal. Futsal's always been pretty good in terms of New Zealand getting sponsorship. It's not huge amounts of financial sponsorship, but again, it helps add to the profile. The first sponsor we had for futsal New Zealand was ASB Bank, which is Commonwealth Bank in Australia. ASB is the New Zealand. And look, they were very good in terms of they gave it a reasonable amount of funding, but it was the brand recognition and actually tying the brand to it that really helped. I pushed it forward.
It did call our attention when we heard here in Australia that Ford was a sponsor in the National League of New Zealand, and the games were broadcast on TV or on where were the games broadcast last season?
Yeah, we had the on Sky Sports.
So
we're on there, and then this year they're going to be with FIFA Plus, the new TV channel, which I don't know if you're across, but there's the new launch of that's gone more global now, where it's gone down to a federation or member association level. Yeah. So now member associations of FIFA actually have the access to what the FIFA Plus platform, which is going to be a game changer because that opens you up to global commercial opportunities. So the full Futsal Super League men's and women's will be actually streamed on the FIFA Plus for the new season.
And Dave, when we talk about pathway in Australia, if you win, you go to the AFC, you go to the AFF to the South East Asia Southeast Asia, and then you can go to the AFC. So there's 2 spots the Australian clubs play for. Is there an Oceania Clubs Championship yet?
There has been an Oceania Clubs Championship, which is the teams coming through, and New Zealand won that last championship for that. That was just a men's format from memory. I do believe that's on the year that kicked off was the year just before COVID, and I believe it's back on the calendar again. So there will be the winner of the leagues will go into that format again.
So there has been one so far.
There has been one, yeah. There was one.
What club from New Zealand won the championship?
Oh, you put me on the spot now. I'm 99% sure that was Auckland City. Yeah.
Well, it's likely it was them.
Yeah.
Dave, moving off a little bit of your background, and then we're going to get your journey again, and then we're going to link to this current status of Futsal New Zealand one more time. Can you just run us through your background and how you got involved in futsal and your journey to become the CEO of the New Zealand Football Federation?
Yeah. Okay. So, I grew up. Obviously, I grew up in a part of northwest London. Sort of council estates and sort of blocks of houses and stuff, and not a lot of green space. And grew up playing a lot of football, and you couldn't get access to fields. There was a field, but there's always kids on it, etc. So you played a lot of street football, played football in the playground, school playgrounds, etc. So I had a big history sort of growing up a cross between street and playing association football, so playing 11-a-side. And actually, that was when there was before it was called futsal in the UK. There was like the football de salon was just starting to sort of take off there. So it was actually an even smaller ball. It was like size 3. So we had a bit of that at school. So I played that somewhat. And then, when I went traveling, I left the UK when I was 19, and I traveled around Southeast Asia and worked and traveled in places like Singapore and Hong Kong, Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, or was Burma at the time. And actually, that's where I first saw futsal. So I actually saw it in Singapore and Malaysia, and actually had a few games and got quite hooked on it. And then when I got to New Zealand, which was in 2002, I met my lovely wife, Sarah, and she was a single mum and had a 4 and 6-year-old, Sam and Hannah. And being originally from Great Britain and having that, so I suppose, football running through the blood, I got the 2 kids playing football. And in Wellington, although it's a lovely day here today, it can rain quite a lot in the winter and be very windy. And basically we had 7 weekends in a row where the games were called off because of rain. Yeah, and as you know, you being a coach, you get to know all the other coaches well, and we're all getting frustrated because we're seeing the kids not develop. So I thought, well, why not hire a hall, and we're taking it inside. And then we managed to get a hall, and we actually started taking the teams that were where the games were cancelled. We played them that week, split the 2 teams into 4, have a little 4-way tournament over an hour and a half.
So that involvement was already as organizing the competition, or was as a coach?
It was organised as a coach. It was me organised. It was me wanting to see the kids not miss out on game after game, working with all the other coaches, the other teams. So we said, well, let's try futsal out. And then the next week we were rained off again. So then the team we played the week before, and then the two teams we were playing that week came along. So then we had 6 teams and 8 teams. And then before you know it, there was 20 odd teams, and we set up a league. And this was all voluntary work, my wife and I. And there was a couple of people who were very passionate about futsal in Wellington, actually from Brazil, Lucas da Silva, a former futsal white, one of them. We thought, this is an opportunity to actually create a league and a structure out of this. So we put a league together. That went really well. We got to about 100 teams. Again, this is all voluntary work.
It's a big job. It was a very big job running a league.
Yeah.
And all the headaches come with it as well.
Particularly when you've got different types of stats, because you've got all different levels and you don't have enough to grade properly. And then before you know it, it was the time when New Zealand football was going for a radical change in the game with the whole of football plan. And that was a guy called John Herdman, who's the current coach of the Canada men's team, and Bev Priestman, who's the coach of the Canada women's team. They were at New Zealand football. They both had played been involved with Simon Clifford, who was involved with futsal being set up in the UK. Who had been involved with him and been in the Sunderland Football Academy that had tried that out. They'd moved to New Zealand, and they helped develop or started out the whole of football plan, which was all kids play small-sided games until the age of 11 before they actually start playing, going to 9-a-side, then 11-a-side. And then they gave me a call, saw what was going on down in Wellington, flew me up to Auckland and said, look, we're keen to have a look at how futsal potentially could be part of the whole of football plan. How would you do it? I work with Paul Tui, who's in Oceania Football now. We were working closely together. There's an organisation that got a steering committee that had been set up for New Zealand football called Futsal New Zealand. We pitched a plan to them and how it could augment with the whole of football plan. And then they asked me to go work for them and implement the plan. So then I ended up becoming the futsal development manager. So
what year was that, if you can
remember?
That
was in 2000. That was actually in 2000 and we qualified for 2009. That was. And actually I started work on the Monday after the All Whites had qualified for the Football World Cup. So my first day in the office was Champagne, which was quite interesting. But yeah, so it was a good time to start. There was a lot of energy with the whole of football plan. There was a desire for small-sided games to be pushed out into the New Zealand football ecosystem, and and obviously I was very passionate about futsal, so it was an opportune time for futsal to explode because there was a whole restructure of the game going on in the country. So it wasn't easy because you had change on top of change, but certainly there was I had a very good boss. John Herdman was an incredible leader, and he fully supported us, at New Zealand Football and federations to push futsal.
It was a good moment for you guys for you to put your passion into the game of futsal. That you went from running 100 junior teams in Wellington to take a position as the futsal development manager for Football New Zealand. At that stage, when you took the role of football development manager for the New Zealand Football Federation, what was futsal like, and what were your first actions as a manager?
Well, I say there was a futsal steering committee. There was some fragmented groups of futsal across the country. There was one, and look, when I say fragmented, you had these were passionate people. So
very passionate,
so we had Capital City Futsal in Wellington, which is the one that we were involved with, it was loosely affiliated to the regional federation. There was East City Futsal, which is the oldest club, which is actually a futsal club that was established in the 80s, run by the Gwilliam family, Barbara Gwilliam. So that was an established entity. There was Paul Tui had Hawke's Bay Futsal, and it was all around where our kids had played, and we all wanted to have something so the kids could keep playing futsal. And then there was a steering committee formed off the back of that. Now that's kind of how that was the structure that was trying to get, similar to what you've got now with the FFA. That was a structure where people were trying to do the right thing, have a steering committee linked to the national football body and try and take the FIFA pathway. There was also Vikings, which was part of ANF.
Yes.
It was a separate entity. So my first job when I got on board was to bring everyone together in one room, and this was up in Auckland at East City Futsal Stadium, ASB Stadium.
Including the
And same
Vikings
way,
or not the Vikings?
including Vikings, and get everyone together. Actually, the guy at Vikings were invited, the CEO, Paul, I forget his surname now, but he actually didn't attend, but he was invited to come. But it was getting all the sponsors, potential sponsors, all the regional sports trusts, the funders, the Sport New Zealand, the government, all into one room, give them an opportunity around, present a plan how we could all come together. There was a game of futsal between Rapa, so the Tahitian, actually the team you saw we played in the final, that team, a lot of that, they came to New Zealand and helped us actually establish futsal New Zealand. So we've got a lot to thank for them. So they brought a team over from Tahiti. They played against East City Futsal, so we had a showcase game to show what it could be like. And then, as you know, the best way to get someone hooked on futsal was get them playing it. And then we organised all the sponsors and all the different factions to come together, and we mixed all the teams up and made a little tournament. And then that's when we set out what the plan would be. And the opportunity was you can come in the tent or you can sit outside the tent, but there is a tent that's going to be constructed and we're going to go forward with this plan. And it's up to you where you want to be part of it. If you don't want to be part of it, it's fine, but it's going to happen and we're going to make sure we deliver it.
And what was the plan like?
Sorry?
And what was the plan?
The plan was to make futsal the best and biggest small-sided sport in New Zealand. So basically, it was a bold vision to focus on. There was, I'm trying to think of a number of areas now, and I can share the plan with you. But the key areas were participation, talent development, facilities, commercialization. They're the four key pillars. So how do we bring money in to support the game? How do we make sure we've got the facility plan that can actually grow with the game? So we make sure we've got the right markings, we've got school play, not just great big facilities. How do we actually get futsal markings on school playgrounds? The other one was education as well. Make sure we've got the education for player, coach, administrator, and officials. Making sure we've got schools programs in place as well. The equipment and facilities. So how do we get cost-effective goals? How do we make sure that we do have the halls to actually create leagues in, etc. All that was put together to basically to develop an ecosystem where you can't just focus in one area. You have to focus on them all, and they all come together. And you have to make sure you've got all of that woven into one system of development. And that is a product. If you look at the futsal whites and the futsal ferns, so our men's and women's team, if you look at them two teams now, I can tell you now every one of them players, and you can ask them yourself. I bet you. Well, I'll be careful to say everyone, but most of them would have coached a game before, would have refereed a game before, and actually been involved with running a league or helped with a league because they've come through the schools program. So these are. I still say they're kids because they were kids to me, but now they're obviously adults. But when you're hearing a 23-year-old futsal white say, they've been interviewing us, I've been playing futsal for 15 years, and they're only 23 years old. That's a systemic view of how you play futsal, and that's why that team qualified for the World Cup. I always look at the Kurukuru, and I've got a lot of respect for them. But what we did on day one was said we could throw all our money at a men's team to try and qualify for a World Cup. But the reality was what we did was we actually made sure we split, we moved the money, the small funds we did have, we used them to actually generate more growth and to actually focus in growing the grassroots of the game and growing up, making sure we have a solid system in place and that the outcome of that solid system will be a team that qualifies for the World Cup. And that's what you got at the weekend was an outcome of a plan, and people sticking to the plan. And a team that is passionate about the entire game, not about themselves. And that's what you saw with that team.
Yeah, I can imagine it would be very rewarding for you to watch the futsal whites qualifying to the World Cup.
So proud. And it's not because it's just because it's New Zealand qualifying. It's because I know each one of them players, how much they've put in. They've not done it. They truly have not done it for themselves. There's not a single player or coaching staff or manager in that squad that does it for themselves. They do it for the community. So, look, it's very, very rewarding. The culture that has been set within the futsal community is, it's systemic. Yeah.
You mentioned those four pillars, education, grassroots. I actually can't tell them the four again. Yeah. But looking back, what was the progression of getting those four pillars into place?
Yeah, I think it was 6 pillars actually. And again, I'll share you the plan. There's a video on you can see the plan was presented.
Because what I asked is, sorry to cut you. We have those pillars here in Australia as well, and we can read those. But achieving those is the hard part, isn't it?
Yeah, I think like achievement. Well, obviously you need to have the backing of the federation. You need to have a person at the top that's going to drive it and is going to lead it. And it's not a job. I can tell you that it's a way of life. That was when I was involved in that job there. That was 7 days a week. You are working all the time. Okay, so you do it out of passion as well. But I suppose on that, I'm not going to try not to go off on a tangent, but the key thing I learned very early on, because obviously you're very passionate about futsal as well, is that if you rely everything on passion, you don't always make the right decisions. Sometimes you've got to make decisions that you don't want to make as well. And what I learned through developing Futsal New Zealand is you've got to have that fine balance between passion and what is commercially realistic as well. And then when you get the two together and you start getting that right balance and you hit the sweet spot, then you can grow. Having the team, having local, like having each region, each federation or state, having a development manager driving it that's passionate about it again as well. Reporting into that futsal development manager. They've got a dotted line, obviously working into the federation as well, or the state as well. And look, and like I say, making sure that you focus on the whole system. Everything needs to come together. Schools programs, having secondary schools being trained to be able to coach primary schools and run primary school leagues, run primary school competitions. Focused on when you have your national secondary school champs or your state champs, don't just focus on the players going. Make sure that when that secondary school teams go, it's not an adult coach that takes it. It's a student that takes the team. It's a student. It's a student that manages the team. It's a student that does the video analysis. It's a student looking at the whole thing. So you're developing people that are involved with the whole sport. So like I said, when you can end up with a team you can put on a court at an international level, that actually they could go and pick up the whistle at halftime and ref the game as well. That's that there. If you can, that's where our sport is at the moment because we're not professional. So that means everybody needs to help. So you need to develop a system where people want to be involved in everything. Specialize, fine, but everyone needs to contribute, and that comes with a culture, establishing a culture.
You mentioned the culture, but I'm still I want to get just a little bit deeper there. You also mentioned that you need to have someone at the top leading all this this change and this system. You got the support from your CEO from everything, but what do you do to sell the picture of futsal in New Zealand to get the support from them?
Again, this is where you've got to look, and this is where I suppose a business mind comes in, right? So this is why you've got to have a balance. Someone that's leading, it's got a commercial acumen as well. But look, people, different states, different regions, your key stakeholders will have different ways they want to buy. Let's put it that way. So if you were running Football New South Wales, for example, you're passionate about futsal. So I could sell you the game of futsal saying you should invest in futsal because it's great. It gives everyone can get involved. Everyone can be involved playing futsal. It's going to be, participation levels going to grow. You understand it straight away. I might go to Football Federation Victoria. It could be someone that's the new CEO of Football Federation Victoria, and I don't know who it is now, but it might have been the former CEO of Commonwealth Bank. Now they're going to have a very financial view on it. So that the way I would sell it there would be by developing leagues, there's income. That income then can sustain the development of the game. You can either bring the game in at cost neutral, or you can make a profit. So again, it's having a plan in place that actually covers, and it goes back to the pillars that if you can show the commercial value, if you can show the player development value, if you can show the participation value, the health value, the value to schools, the value, if you need to have metrics and indicators that cover all of them, so your message can pivot and change with facts and data based on who you're talking to and who you're projecting it to. And you can only do that if you develop a whole system.
Understand. We might have to hire to come spend some holidays in Australia. But Dave, if you could look back at all those years that you worked as a futsal development manager, what was one of the key factors for the success of futsal in New Zealand? I know you mentioned all of those, but
Well, I mean, the key factor, again, it's going to come, and it sounds waffly, and it comes down to people at the end of the day. Like it really does. I mean, leadership is probably the key factor, right? If you have a good leader and you can create followership, and that's not me big. I focus on leadership. I'm passionate about leadership. I study it, etc. I put a lot of work into myself to become a good leader and understand how I could get people to follow me. So I did a lot of reading and a lot of studying, and if you've got a good leader and you can create followers and you can show hope and optimism and that you can drive something forward, then people will follow you. The next thing you need is to make sure you've got that good plan, so they're not just following someone that's got a hollow, there's nothing that sits behind it. So a plan that is built with the people that want to follow you. So you've all contributed to that plan, a plan that when they go and sell it in their regions and talk to them, they're just as passionate about it as you are. That's what will drive the growth of futsal. If you're saying it's specific to Australia, look, and I'm quite, Australia is almost like a third home to me. A lot of my family live in Australia as well. And, I do look at Australia and it frustrates me where futsal's at. It should be in a way better place than it is. You should be far ahead of New Zealand. The reality is, you talk about that playing a Trans-Tasman against New Zealand, and here's a challenge for you. I'd say we beat you now. We should have.
You would be interesting. I do think that player-wise we have a lot of quality, and the futsal whites look very organized at the moment.
Yeah, and this is the thing, and you should be in a space where you've got a lot of futsal participation in Australia. It's probably dropped now because of the mismanagement, but there's a lot of opportunity in Australia to grow that game. And God, it could be a commercial game. It could be great for the FFA, and it could be great for the player. It could be great for everyone. But there's clearly a gap there that needs addressing, and it's something that I've spent a few times coming across. I presented to FFV when Kim was there as well, and he was, there's been supportive people, but it's never. Yeah. It's one state being supportive, not everybody, and you need to get that full buy-in from the federation to actually drive it.
Yeah, we actually have good leaders of each state in Australia. We all have good leaders, but I'm not exactly sure who is above these leaders. There is not a Dave Payne from what I can see here. Yeah. But Dave, just moving over to the national teams, Marvin has been now the head coach of the men's national team for the last 2 OFCs with 2 FC titles. You guys just qualified for its first ever FIFA Futsal World Cup. Can you just give a quick background of the men's national team and its goals for the upcoming World Cup?
Yeah, and just to be clear, obviously I don't work for New Zealand football anymore, but I do sit on the advisory group, reports to New Zealand football. So, in terms of, let's go back to how we got to where we are now. So that team's been very well led by Marvin, a former player, as you know, capped 60 caps or 59 caps for New Zealand.
We've had him on the podcast twice, by the way. Yeah, so we've heard it from him.
He bleeds futsal, right? So, fantastic coach. It's a little thing about, I don't know if he said it on one of the podcasts, and you can ask some of the challenging conversations me and him had back in the day, because, I wanted him to coach a bit earlier, but he wanted to try and get one more World Cup. So the previous one before he was coaching, he decided to keep on playing. He could have coached then. He had an opportunity to coach then, but he, as an assistant coach, knowing that he was a succession plan. So he'd been doing all his qualifications. But look, the team's got to where it's got to through, and particularly through COVID, where there was a big, almost a big shutdown as well. This is a team where we've got players now playing across all over the globe. There is, if you're looking at where they come from, like Waikato Bay Plenty has become a real hub for futsal development as well, with some from Braden Lissington and Sam Marston and some of the crew there, Wayne Bates, some people that are really passionate about futsal, and the futsal families, as you know, there's families that have got 3 or 4 kids playing and are really passionate about it. So that's, I suppose, where I'm waffling around. There's been some very good localized hubs that have been involved with the National League that have got some really good local coaches in place that can follow a program that Marvin's put in place and have managed to keep that going, and in Wellington and across the whole country. So when the teams did get back together again, although they've been apart for a long time, there's a program that everyone's been following to make sure that when they do come together, there is a level of cohesion that is there. It's still not as good as being together all the time, but there was a level of cohesion. So, and they've had some good games, not enough games. I mean, I've been frustrated. I don't think they've had enough games, but they've done it. They've got to where they got to. And in terms of getting what comes next, because we don't just have the men's team, we have to balance. And this is the thing. You have to have a balance between the men's and women's game in futsal now. It would be very easy for us to throw all the money at the men's team how's that fair to the futsal ferns?
Because also we saw the mains winning, we saw the girls celebrating for the mains. So there is
Yeah.
that sense of they help
Yeah.
each other, isn't there?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. So Shivy, who was actually in the management staff in the futsal whites, is a futsal fern. A lot of they're very tight knit. Them two teams are very close. So yeah, look, the reality is that team will I'm going to be working as much as I can behind the scenes with them to make sure, and using my contacts, and maybe we can tap into you as well, get as many games as we possibly can. Within noting that they're not most of them aren't professional players. They've got to balance their work and family commitments as well. But it'll be how can we get as many games as possible to get them as prepared as possible for Uzbekistan and to perform on a world stage. And look, I think they will get out of the group stage. I actually do, because I know there's some serious talent in that team, and it's the sort of talent, because they're young, it will just keep on growing. It's organic growth that's going to come from that team. So yeah, look, watch out. I think they're going to surprise a few people at the World Cup.
I think making out of the group stage it's a big task. But it's an achievable task to work towards.
Definitely. I think it is. I know the guys, and Marvin and Enrico. So Morales, the assistant coach, Brazilian. So they will do everything they can within their means to target that goal. So in short, I think we'll be looking at who else qualifies, trying to look at what sort of teams we need to play against to compete at that level. Try and get games against them teams if possible.
We saw in the last World Cup, all 5 Asian nations qualified through to the finals.
Yes, yeah.
Dave, sorry to cut you, but I want to so the futsal ferns, they have a tournament later in the month. Now they have already started preparing for these upcoming qualifiers whenever it is. But I want to talk to you about the bidding for the 2020 FIFA Futsal World Cup. Just briefly, I know we're running out of time, but how did the idea came about, and what was the process like of bidding for the World Cup?
Well, I think it goes back just to like that comment I just said about getting out of group stage, and you said that's a tough task, and that's what fuels me. It's like, okay, well, let's get it done then. I think I love a challenge, and New Zealand loves a challenge. And my view, and it still is my view at the time was actually New Zealand was leading in futsal development, not because we had the best men's team, because we actually had a system of development that we could sell. As people could look at what we're doing and go, actually, that makes sense. It's easy to understand. It makes sense, and it works. So I felt we earned the right to actually bid for the World Cup. But I also, more importantly, I thought we could actually have something we could share with the world that could advance futsal into a global sport that had more recognition, the recognition it deserved. So the whole bid, and look, I'm happy to share it with you. I'm sure we can. The whole bid was focused on actually bring the world to New Zealand, but develop futsal for the world. And there was lots of symposiums and conferences wrapped around it to bring the likes of yourself and people that are passionate about futsal, reward those that are passionate about the game, and actually basically share as much knowledge to put plans together so people would go away from that and actually help emerging nations, help their own nations to develop futsal. So it wasn't just about the men playing on the court. It was about the World Cup was all around how do we actually get together, this unique opportunity to bring all the best minds together. How do we actually not just focus on a technical study group, not just focus on something that's about how do we actually all come together and actually focus on bringing the game into a better place. And that was what it was all about. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. It went to Lithuania. I believe we probably came second. I don't know, but yeah, it was quite.
Who were the last few? I think it was Japan as well, wasn't it?
Japan as well, and Japan's bid. I mean, and look, we all talk. They're great guys, the Lithuanian guys. I spent time with them in Colombia at the 2016 World Cup because they got all the people that got through the process together to the final 6, I think it was. So I was with the Iranians, as well. And look, it was. Yeah, they're all good bids, but I think ours was a bit different where it wasn't just focused on running a good event. It was actually focused on some systemic change in the game and actually, pushing FIFA as well to go wider than just a tournament, saying actually we need to look at the whole game. And which they have started to do, to be fair. Yeah.
Yeah, it's probably what's missing in the game. The game is so fragmented in so many ways. And yeah, it was a good chance. And to be fair, between the 3 countries, I thought they picked the the worst option. All respect to Lithuania, I've got friends there as well, but ended up being an amazing World Cup. It was awesome. But when they announced that Lithuania between the three, I was surprised. I was shocked, actually.
Well, but it's funny though, when I knew Lithuania would be strong from the fact that if you think about the basketball culture in Lithuania and the similarities between basketball and futsal in terms of the full court press and actually the rotations in basketball are very similar to futsal, as you probably know. Like you can take a basketball coach and they can understand futsal tactics and vice versa. So I knew that they'd have the facilities. I knew that they'd have, like, the population would probably get behind it as well. Obviously COVID wasn't kind to them as well. That didn't really help that event. But look, and it's Europe, and Europe's always going to be strong when they bid. And there's still a lot of growth for futsal in UEFA. And it's where, from a FIFA point of view, if you think about it, for growing futsal, UEFA is where you'll get you can get a high return for putting on an event as well. But I hope we do bid for the next World Cup. Because I think New Zealand deserves it, and I think it will actually add value to the world beyond just the tournament as well. And obviously we've got the FIFA Women's Futsal World Cup as well. So we just held a very successful Women's Football World Cup.
Everyone listening, Dave didn't say this, but I'm saying. So I'm saying that New Zealand is going to bid for the next 2 World Cups. Dave didn't say that.
No, but yeah. No, it would be great, wouldn't it? I mean, we can run a good event. I can tell you that. Is like I say, as you would have seen from the FIFA Women's World Cup, they're a fantastic team that put that event on. The New Zealand staff that are involved in that event, most of them have been involved with futsal at some point as well.
It would be amazing. And when you got the answer for the bidding, you just got a no answer, or you've got an explanation why, or was there anything?
No, look, to be honest, it's quite a cutthroat process. And obviously, you've got back channel communications as well, but the actual, you get the form for a letter. And that, I mean, look, that was ultimately why, to be honest, that was enough. I mean, I resigned quite quickly after that because I felt I'd let the country down because I put so much in, and everyone, I felt everyone had put. I put so much into putting the final piece of work together alongside a very amazing gentleman, Peter O'Hara, But that for me was the prize for the country, for the community, for the futsal community. Done so. I wanted to give that to them and say, guys, this is the reward for everything you've done. And I felt like I'd let a lot of people down. It turned out, I hadn't. A lot of people really respected me for how far we drove it, but it was time. It was time for me. I put, my family paid a lot for me being involved with futsal. I was away a lot, hell of a lot, more than I should have been as a father. So it was timing. It was a good time for me to actually have a change.
Yeah, but I don't think you should feel that way, that you let the community down, because you just saw all the hard work for all those many years paying off now. And in the futsal community, we've got so many people like you that it's so passionate and they devote all their lives to futsal. Eventually they get frustrated sometimes. Some quit, some stay in the game. But we are very thankful to people like you.
Oh, thank you. Look, and yourself, like you're a great advocate for futsal in Australia, and it's I've always loved watching your videos and your passion and particularly your involvement with youth. It's great to see, and I wish you all the very best there with the work in Australia.
I think the only thing the only thing I can actually change is the kids around me. Apart from that, we try through social media, but the kids around me is where I can have the biggest effect. Dave. That wraps up the podcast. Again, I want to congratulate you on everything you've done for futsal New Zealand. I'm sure the futsal community is also very thankful to you, as I said. Best of luck for the future, and I look forward to continue following New Zealand futsal success.
No, thank you, and I really enjoy it. And all the very best to you, and thank you for your time and everything you do for futsal.
Thank you, Dave. And thanks to everyone for listening to our Caro Futsal Podcast. Together, we can make a beautiful game bigger, and stay tuned for